Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. The sky over the Montana wilderness turned a menacing gray as Hunter Caldwell chopped another log for his woodpile. His weathered hands worked methodically, the rhythm of the axe against wood the only sound besides the distant rumble of thunder. At 42, Hunter had spent the last 5 years in almost complete isolation, his cabin perched on the edge of the national forest, miles from the nearest neighbor. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool autumn air. The gathering storm clouds suggested he'd better finish up. Hunter had developed a sixth sense about mountain weather during his years alone. After his wife's death, he'd abandoned his architectural practice in Seattle and retreated to this remote property he'd inherited from his grandfather. The first drops of rain began to fall as he gathered the split logs in his arms. A gust of wind carried an unusual sound, something between a cry and a groan. Hunter froze, listening intently. Living alone in the wilderness had made him cautious of unexpected noises. When he heard it again, he set down the wood and moved toward the source. The sound seemed to be coming from his roof. Puzzled, Hunter circled his cabin, looking upward. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. A woman was clinging to his chimney, her blonde hair whipping wildly in the wind. She appeared to be stuck, one leg dangling at an awkward angle. Even more bizarre was what appeared to be charred lettering on the roof beside her, something that looked like Apache lover burned into the wooden shingles. "Hey," Hunter called up. "Are you okay?" The woman turned her head, revealing a face filled with equal parts pain and embarrassment. "Does it look like I'm okay?" she shouted back, her voice carrying a hint of a southern accent. "Hold on," Hunter said. Already moving toward the ladder, he kept propped against the shed. "I'm coming up." The rain was falling harder now as Hunter carefully made his way across the slippery roof. Up close, he could see the woman was in her mid-30s, with striking green eyes currently narrowed in pain. She wore hiking boots, jeans, and a rain jacket that had done little to keep her dry. "I'm Hunter," he said, reaching her side. "What happened?" Cassidy Greenwood," she replied through gritted teeth. "I was hiking and got caught in the storm. Saw your cabin and thought I'd ask for shelter, but nobody answered the door. Then I noticed smoke coming out wrong from your chimney. Thought it might be blocked and causing carbon monoxide inside. So I climbed up to check. Slipped and—" She gestured toward her leg. "Pretty sure it's broken." Hunter glanced at the burned lettering beside her. "And this?" Cassidy's pale cheeks flushed. "That was already there when I got up here. Wasn't me." Hunter wasn't sure he believed her, but her injury was genuine. "We need to get you down before this storm gets worse. I'm going to have to carry you." Cassidy looked skeptical. "You sure you can manage that?" Despite his solitary lifestyle, Hunter had stayed fit. Years of chopping wood and maintaining his property had kept his tall frame strong. "Pretty sure," he said, a hint of a smile crossing his face for what felt like the first time in years. Getting her down was a challenge, but Hunter managed it, carefully descending the ladder with Cassidy clinging to his back. By the time they made it inside, they were both soaked to the bone. Hunter eased Cassidy onto his worn leather couch, then built up the fire in his wood stove. The cabin was simple but meticulously maintained. One large room with a kitchen area, a small bathroom partitioned off, and a loft bedroom above. "I need to look at that leg," Hunter said, retrieving a first aid kit from beneath the kitchen sink. 5 years of isolation had taught him basic medical skills. "Mind if I cut the jeans?" Cassidy shook her head, wincing as he carefully cut the denim away from her swollen ankle. It didn't look broken to his untrained eye, but it was badly sprained at minimum. "You live here alone?" Cassidy asked, obviously trying to distract herself from the pain. Hunter nodded, focusing on wrapping her ankle with an elastic bandage. "For about 5 years now." "And you like it?" "The solitude." Hunter paused, considering. No one had asked him that in a long time. Most people in the small town 30 miles away had stopped questioning his hermit lifestyle years ago. "It's peaceful," he said finally. "Simple. Lonely," Cassidy added, her green eyes studying him. Hunter didn't respond. He finished wrapping her ankle and stood. "You should get out of those wet clothes. I'll find you something to wear." He climbed to the loft and returned with a flannel shirt and sweatpants that would swallow her smaller frame. "Bathroom's through there. I'll make some coffee." While Cassidy changed, Hunter set water to boil on his wood stove and tried to process the strange turn his day had taken. It had been months since he'd had a visitor of any kind, and years since a woman had been in his cabin. The last was Dr. Leon Morris, who'd come to check on him after he'd missed several appointments in town. She'd pronounced him physically healthy, but worryingly isolated. Hunter had stopped going to town for anything but absolute necessities after that. Cassidy emerged from the bathroom, her blonde hair damp but combed, swimming in his clothes. She'd rolled up the sleeves and pant legs, but still looked like a child playing dress-up. Something about the sight tugged at Hunter's chest. "The storm's getting worse," he said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Cell service is spotty up here at the best of times, and non-existent during storms. You're probably stuck here until morning." Cassidy accepted the mug with a grateful nod. "Sorry to impose. I was stupid to go hiking alone with weather coming in. What brought you out here? These trails aren't on any tourist maps." "Research," Cassidy said, taking a sip of her coffee. "I'm writing a book about forgotten frontier history. There's supposed to be the ruins of an old trading post somewhere in these mountains." Hunter raised an eyebrow. "Caldwell Trading Post? That was my great-great-grandfather's place. Not much left of it now." Cassidy nearly choked on her coffee. "You're kidding. You're a Caldwell?" The Caldwells were one of the few white families that had peaceful trading relationships with the Apache in this region. Hunter shrugged. "Family history wasn't big in our house. My grandfather left me this property, but he never talked much about the past. That's why I'm here," Cassidy said, excitement momentarily overriding her pain. "The relationship between Jacob Caldwell and the local Apache is fascinating. He learned their language, respected their customs. There are even stories that he had an Apache wife before his official marriage was recorded." Hunter frowned. "What does that have to do with what's burned on my roof?" Cassidy hesitated, her fingers tightening around the mug. "Well, that's the thing. According to my research, locals used to call Jacob the Apache lover behind his back. Some meant it as an insult, others as a sign of respect. And you just happened to find my cabin?" "Not exactly," Cassidy admitted. "I knew a Caldwell property was out here. I didn't know if anyone still lived in it. I was hoping to at least photograph the place." Hunter felt a surge of irritation. His privacy had been his most valued possession for 5 years. "So you trespassed, damaged my roof, and got yourself injured in the process." "I didn't damage your roof," Cassidy protested. "That burning was already there. And I wouldn't have climbed up if I'd known someone was home. I called out first." Hunter wanted to argue, but a crash of thunder shook the cabin, making them both jump. The lights flickered, then went out completely, leaving only the orange glow from the wood stove. "Perfect," Hunter muttered, rising to find lanterns. By the time he had the cabin illuminated with kerosene light, his irritation had subsided somewhat. It wasn't entirely Cassidy's fault. He often worked outside with headphones on, oblivious to visitors, which was how he preferred it. "I'm sorry," Cassidy said softly as he sat back down. "I should have been more careful, more respectful of private property." Hunter sighed. "It's fine. You're injured, and it's not like you can go anywhere tonight anyway." He glanced toward the windows, where rain lashed against the glass. "Are you hungry?" They ate a simple meal of venison stew Hunter had prepared the day before. As they ate, Cassidy asked him about the cabin, and he found himself talking more than he had in years. There was something disarming about her genuine interest, her quick mind. She didn't press him about why he lived alone, and he appreciated that. As the evening wore on, Hunter brought out a bottle of whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes. "Might help with the pain," he offered. Cassidy accepted a small glass. "So, you never wondered about your family history? The Apache connection?" Hunter swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "My father wasn't interested in the past. He was a corporate lawyer in Seattle, completely disconnected from this place. He sold most of the original Caldwell land decades ago. Only kept this parcel because my grandfather insisted." "And you? What did you do before?" Cassidy gestured around the cabin. "Architect," Hunter said simply. "Commercial buildings mostly. What made you leave it behind?" Hunter stared into the fire. He rarely talked about Sarah, even to himself. The pain had dulled over the years, but speaking her name still felt like pressing on a bruise. "My wife died," he said finally. "Car accident. Drunk driver." Cassidy's expression softened. "I'm sorry, Hunter." He nodded, accepting her sympathy but not inviting more discussion. To his relief, Cassidy changed the subject. "Tell me about the cabin. Did you renovate it yourself?" The conversation shifted to safer ground. Hunter explained how he'd spent his first year here restoring the cabin, which had fallen into disrepair. It had given him purpose when he'd needed it most. As the night deepened, Hunter made up the couch for himself, insisting Cassidy take the loft bed with her injured ankle. She protested but eventually relented when he pointed out the impracticality of her climbing the ladder. "I'll check on that roof burning in the morning," Hunter said as he handed her extra blankets. "Try to figure out who did it." Cassidy paused at the base of the ladder. "You really don't think it's been there a long time?" Hunter shook his head. "I replaced those shingles myself 3 summers ago. It's recent." A flicker of unease crossed Cassidy's face. "Who would do something like that? Do you have enemies?" "Hard to have enemies when you hardly see anyone," Hunter replied. "Get some rest. We'll figure it out tomorrow." But sleep eluded Hunter that night. He lay on the couch, listening to the storm rage outside and the occasional creak from the loft as Cassidy shifted in her sleep. Having another person in his space felt strange, not entirely unpleasant, but disorienting. Like putting on clothes that used to fit, but now hung awkwardly on his frame. He thought about what Cassidy had said about his ancestors. Hunter had never given much thought to his family's past. His father had raised him to look forward, not back. "History is for academics and dreamers," Richard Caldwell had often said. "The future is where the money is." But now, with a historian sleeping in his loft, Hunter found himself curious. What kind of man had Jacob Caldwell been, to bridge 2 worlds so different from each other? And why had someone burned Apache lover into his roof? When Hunter finally drifted off, his dreams were unsettled, filled with figures moving through forests, whispered conversations in languages he didn't understand, and a blonde woman standing on a distant ridge, beckoning him forward. He woke at dawn to the smell of coffee. Cassidy had somehow managed to get down from the loft and was standing at his stove, her weight carefully balanced on her good leg. "Sorry," she said when she noticed him watching. "I'm an early riser. Hope you don't mind." Hunter sat up, running a hand through his sleep-mussed hair. "You shouldn't be on that ankle." "It's feeling better," Cassidy said, though her wince as she shifted her weight suggested otherwise. The storms passed. Hunter moved to the window. The morning was clear, the forest glistening with raindrops in the early light. "I'll check the roads after breakfast. See if I can get you back to town." Cassidy nodded, but seemed hesitant. "Before that, I'd like to show you something, if you're willing." After a quick breakfast, Hunter found himself following Cassidy's directions through the forest behind his cabin. She moved slowly with the walking stick he'd fashioned for her, but insisted the spot wasn't far. "There," she said finally, pointing to what looked like a pile of stones half hidden by underbrush. "That's part of the original trading post foundation." Hunter frowned. He'd explored these woods extensively, but had never noticed this. "You're sure?" Cassidy nodded eagerly. "The location matches historical records. And look here." She knelt awkwardly, brushing aside leaves to reveal what appeared to be a carved symbol in one of the stones. This is a Apache protection symbol. It was common for them to mark places of peaceful trade. Hunter bent down to examine it. The carving was weathered but unmistakably deliberate, a series of interconnected lines forming a pattern he didn't recognize. "How do you know all this?" he asked, genuinely curious. "My grandmother was part Apache," Cassidy said. "Not from this region, but she instilled in me an interest in Native American history. When I discovered the connection between the Caldwells and the Apache here, it became something of an obsession." Hunter ran his fingers over the carved stone, feeling a strange connection to the past he'd never sought. "What exactly happened here? With my ancestor?" Cassidy's eyes lit up. "Jacob Caldwell arrived here in 1868, established the trading post against the advice of other settlers who feared the Apache. But Jacob learned their language, respected their customs. He traded fairly when others cheated. According to my research, he fell in love with an Apache woman named Morning Sky. And they married?" Hunter asked. "In the Apache tradition, yes. But when more settlers arrived, Jacob was pressured to take a white wife for appearances. Historical records show he married Elizabeth Thornton in 1872, but there are journal entries suggesting he maintained his relationship with Morning Sky in secret." Hunter stood, troubled by this revelation. "So my great-great-grandfather was a bigamist." "It was complicated," Cassidy said gently. "Different times, different values. What's remarkable is that Jacob managed to maintain peace between two communities that were often in conflict. The trading post became neutral ground. As they made their way back to the cabin, Hunter was quiet, processing this new information about his family. He'd never felt particularly connected to his ancestors, but now he found himself wondering if his retreat to these mountains had been entirely his own choice, or if something in his blood had called him back. At the cabin, Hunter helped Cassidy up the porch steps, acutely aware of her hand on his arm, the scent of her hair as she leaned against him. It had been so long since he'd been this close to anyone. The feeling was both comforting and alarming. "I should check the roof," he said, needing distance from these unfamiliar emotions. "See that burning up close?" Hunter climbed the ladder alone, making his way carefully across the damp shingles. The words "Apache lover" were indeed burned into the wood, the edges blackened and precise. This wasn't vandalism done in haste. Someone had taken their time, using what appeared to be a woodbending tool to create the letters. When he came back down, Cassidy was waiting anxiously. "What do you think? Who would do that?" Hunter shook his head. "No idea, but they knew what they were doing. It's deliberate work." "Do you think?" Cassidy hesitated. "Do you think it's connected to my research? I've been asking questions in town about the Caldwell-Apache connection. You think someone followed you here?" Hunter frowned. "Why would anyone care about history that old?" "Some histories are sensitive," Cassidy said. "Some families don't like having their ancestors' choices questioned, especially when those choices crossed racial boundaries." Hunter considered this. "The Millers," he said suddenly. "They own most of the land around here now. My grandfather used to say they've held a grudge against Caldwells for generations. Something about a land dispute. Worth looking into," Cassidy agreed. "Though I should probably get back to town first and have this ankle properly checked." Hunter nodded, trying to ignore the odd disappointment he felt at the thought of her leaving. "I'll get the truck ready." The drive into Pinecrest was slow going. Recent rains had left the dirt road rutted and muddy in places. Hunter kept glancing over at Cassidy, who was taking pictures of the landscape with her phone and making occasional notes. "You really love this stuff, don't you?" he asked, digging through the past. Cassidy smiled. "I think understanding where we came from helps us understand who we are. All those choices our ancestors made, the good and the bad, they're part of us. Even if we never knew about them. Especially then," Cassidy said. "The stories we don't know shape us in ways we can't see." They lapsed into comfortable silence until they reached the outskirts of town. Hunter rarely came to Pinecrest, and when he did, he kept to himself. Now, driving down Main Street with Cassidy beside him, he was acutely aware of the curious glances from locals. "The clinic is just past the diner," Cassidy directed. Dr. Reyes confirmed what Hunter had suspected, a severe sprain, not a break. She wrapped Cassidy's ankle professionally and prescribed rest and elevation. "You staying at the Pine Ridge Motel?" the doctor asked Cassidy. "Yes, but I was thinking of checking out. My research is taking longer than expected, and they're booked for the weekend." Dr. Reyes frowned. "It's hunting season. You'll be hard-pressed to find a room anywhere within 50 miles. Hunter found himself speaking before he'd fully thought it through. "She can stay at my place. Until she's mobile again." Both women looked at him with surprise. Hunter was a bit shocked himself. "That's very kind," Cassidy said carefully. "But I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," Hunter said, committed now. "It makes sense. You need rest, and I have the space. Plus, I'm curious about this roof situation now." And that was how Hunter Caldwell, who had spoken perhaps 50 words to strangers in the past year, found himself driving back to his cabin with Cassidy Greenwood and a week's worth of her belongings. "Are you sure about this?" Cassidy asked as they bumped along the forest road. "I'm a stranger who trespassed on your property. For all you know, I burned those words into your roof myself." Hunter glanced at her. "Did you?" "No," Cassidy said firmly. "But you only have my word for that." "I'm a decent judge of character," Hunter said, surprising himself again. 5 years of solitude gives you time to think about people. What makes them tick? I don't think you're the type to vandalize property for no reason." "Thank you," Cassidy said softly, "for trusting me." The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Hunter set Cassidy up with books and research materials on the couch during the day while he worked outside. In the evenings, they cooked together and talked about history, about architecture, about the natural world surrounding them. Hunter found himself enjoying the company, the conversations that stretched late into the night. Cassidy shared more of her research, showing him copies of old letters and journals she'd collected. Hunter was fascinated by the glimpses into his ancestor's life, the complex balancing act Jacob had performed between two worlds. "Listen to this," Cassidy said one evening, reading from a copy of a letter Jacob had written to his brother. "The people here speak of savages, but I have found more humanity among the Apache than in the halls of Boston society. Morning sky has taught me to see the world anew, the language of the forest, the wisdom of patience. I fear society would not understand what we have built together, so we keep to ourselves when possible." Hunter stared into the fire. He loved her. By all accounts, deeply, Cassidy agreed. Which makes what happened later all the more tragic. What happened? Cassidy hesitated. According to Apache oral histories passed down, Morning Sky disappeared in the winter of 1874. Some believe she was killed by settlers who disapproved of her relationship with Jacob. Others say she left of her own accord when Jacob's white wife gave birth to their first child. "My direct ancestor," Hunter said quietly. "Yes, Thomas Caldwell, born January 1874. Jacob's legitimate heir in the eyes of society." "And what do you think happened to Morning Sky?" Cassidy closed the journal. "I think she stayed nearby. There are accounts of a native woman living in a cabin deep in the forest who would help lost travelers heal the sick. Local children called her the mountain ghost because she would appear and disappear so suddenly." "You think Jacob still saw her?" "I think their love was the kind that doesn't simply end because society demands it," Cassidy said, her eyes meeting Hunter's across the table. Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition, perhaps, of parallels across time. Hunter found himself wondering what it would be like to love someone that deeply, to defy convention for them. He'd loved Sarah, but theirs had been a comfortable love, conventional and unchallenged by the world. The next morning, Hunter woke early and slipped out to check his snares. The forest was misty, the ground soft beneath his boots. As he collected 2 rabbits from a trap, he heard a twig snap behind him. He turned to find a man watching him from between the trees. Mike Miller, the eldest son of the family that owned the neighboring property. He was Hunter's age, but looked older, his face weathered by hard living and harder drinking. "Caldwell," Mike said, his tone making the name sound like a curse. "Heard you had company up at the cabin." Hunter straightened, instantly on guard. "What's it to you, Miller?" "Just interesting," Mike said, stepping closer. 5 years without so much as a dinner guest. Now you've got a pretty blonde staying with you. A researcher, I hear, asking all sorts of questions around town." "She's writing a book," Hunter said carefully. "Historical research." Mike's laugh was harsh. "History. Right. Digging up old stories better left buried. Like how your family sided with Indians over their own kind. That was 150 years ago, Miller." "Some things don't fade with time," Mike said. "Like shame. Like betrayal." He spat on the ground. "Your Apache-loving ancestor is the reason my family lost their original claim. Jacob Caldwell testified that my great-great-grandfather violated Apache burial grounds, caused the government to revoke his homestead rights." Hunter hadn't known this specific history, but it explained the generations-long animosity between the families. "That was between them. Has nothing to do with us." "Everything to do with us?" Miller insisted. "Blood tells, Caldwell. Your blood's tainted. Always has been." He gestured vaguely toward the cabin. "Tell your lady friend to watch her step. Not everyone appreciates having old wounds reopened." With that, Miller turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving Hunter standing with the rabbits in his hand and a cold feeling in his stomach. When he returned to the cabin, Hunter found Cassidy on the porch, her ankle propped on a stool, laptop open beside her. "You look troubled," she said, closing the computer. Hunter set the rabbits down and told her about his encounter with Mike Miller. Cassidy listened intently, her expression growing serious. "You think he burned the message on your roof?" she asked when he finished. "Seems likely," Hunter admitted. "He's got the motive and the mean streak for it." He hesitated. "Maybe you should go back to town. If the Millers are taking an interest in your research, it could get unpleasant." Cassidy shook her head firmly. "I'm not easily intimidated, Hunter. Besides, this only confirms what I suspected. There's more to this story than the official records show." "It's not worth getting hurt over," Hunter argued. "History is always worth it," Cassidy countered. Understanding the past helps us avoid repeating its mistakes. She reached out, her hand covering his. I appreciate your concern, but I'm staying. If you'll still have me. Her touch sent warmth spreading up Hunter's arm. He looked down at their hands, then up at her determined face. Something in her reminded him of the descriptions of morning sky, strong-willed, unafraid of challenges. Okay, he said finally. But we need to be careful. The Millers can be vindictive. That evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, Hunter found himself watching Cassidy move around his kitchen. In just a few days, she had transformed his space, brought life and conversation back into a cabin that had been silent for too long. Her ankle was improving. She could put weight on it now, though she still moved carefully. I've been thinking, Hunter said as they settled by the fire with cups of coffee. About Jacob and morning sky. About choices. Cassidy looked up, her green eyes reflecting the firelight. What kind of choices? The kind that define a life, Hunter said slowly. Jacob chose this land, chose to bridge two worlds. When Sarah died, I chose isolation. I've been telling myself it was grief, but maybe it was fear too. Fear of living in a world where the person I built everything around was gone. That's understandable, Cassidy said gently. Hunter shook his head. But it's not living. Not really. He met her gaze directly. Being here, with you these past days, it's reminded me what it feels like to be connected. To care about something beyond survival. Cassidy set her mug down, her expression unreadable. Hunter, I'm not declaring anything, he said quickly. I'm just acknowledging a truth. You've woken something in me that I thought was dead. And whatever happens after you leave, I'll be grateful for that. Cassidy was silent for a long moment. What if I didn't leave? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hunter's breath caught. What do you mean? I mean, Cassidy said, choosing her words carefully, that I've felt it too. This connection. It doesn't make logical sense. We barely know each other. But there's something here that feels important. Hunter moved closer to her on the couch, his heart beating faster than it had in years. It's not just gratitude or proximity. Cassidy's smile was warm. I've spent enough time studying human connections across history to recognize something genuine when I feel it. She reached up, her fingers gently touching his bearded cheek. The question is, what do we do about it? Hunter covered her hand with his own. Maybe we start by acknowledging it's real, and that it's okay to want more than solitude. Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration. Hunter had almost forgotten the simple pleasure of such intimacy, the way the world narrowed to the space between two people. When they parted, Cassidy's eyes were bright with emotion. I'm scared, she admitted. This wasn't what I came here for. The best discoveries rarely are, Hunter said, surprising himself with the certainty he felt. Isn't that what research is about? Finding the unexpected? Cassidy laughed softly. Are you using my own logic against me? Is it working? Instead of answering, she kissed him again, deeper this time. Hunter felt something loosen in his chest, a tightness he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of him. Later that night, after Cassidy had gone up to the loft to sleep, Hunter sat by the dying fire, thinking about choices and consequences. He knew this newfound connection with Cassidy complicated things, her research, his solitude, the local tensions. But for the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow, curious about what it might bring. The sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet. Hunter leapt to his feet as a rock crashed through his front window, sending shards flying across the floor. He rushed to the door, flinging it open in time to see headlights disappearing down his drive. Hunter, Cassidy called from the loft, her voice tight with alarm. What happened? Stay up there, Hunter ordered, grabbing a flashlight to check for further damage. The rock had a note wrapped around it, secured with a rubber band. Hunter unfolded it with steady hands, though his pulse was racing. History repeats, it read in blocky capital letters. Apache lovers die. Hunter's blood ran cold. He crumpled the note in his fist, suddenly furious. 5 years of peaceful isolation shattered in an instant by ignorance and hatred that should have died generations ago. Hunter. Cassidy was at the top of the ladder now, her face pale in the dim light. What is it? He wanted to shield her from this, but she deserved the truth. Wordlessly, he handed her the crumpled note. Cassidy smoothed it out, her expression hardening as she read. The Millers, she said, her voice steady despite the obvious fear in her eyes. Hunter nodded. Has to be. He began gathering the broken glass, his movements precise and controlled despite his anger. I'm calling the sheriff in the morning. Will that help? Cassidy asked, carefully descending the ladder. From what you've told me, the Millers have influence in town. Sheriff Daniels is fair, Hunter said. And a threat is a threat, regardless of who made it. They cleaned up the glass together, then boarded the window with plywood Hunter kept for emergencies. Neither mentioned the kiss they'd shared earlier, but something had shifted again between them. Their tentative connection now forged stronger in the face of outside threat. Hunter insisted on taking the first watch while Cassidy slept, though he doubted the Millers would return that night. Intimidation was their style, not direct confrontation. Still, he kept his grandfather's shotgun across his lap as he sat by the repaired window, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Sheriff Daniels arrived mid-morning, his cruiser bumping up the rutted drive. He was a tall man with a carefully neutral expression that had served him well in local disputes. Quite a welcome wagon you received, he commented after examining the rock and note. Any idea who's behind it? Mike Miller confronted me in the woods yesterday, Hunter said. Made it clear he didn't appreciate Cassidy's research into my family history. The sheriff nodded slowly. The Caldwell Apache connection. That's still a sore spot for some of the older families around here. Sore enough to justify threats. Cassidy asked from her seat at the table. Sheriff Daniels shrugged. People get protective of their narratives, ma'am. The way the Miller family tells it, your ancestor, he nodded to Hunter, cost them their rightful claim because he chose Apache interests over white settlers. And that justifies vandalism and threats 150 years later. Hunter demanded. Of course not, the sheriff said. I'll have a word with Mike. But without proof it was him. He let the sentence hang. Might be best if Ms. Greenwood concluded her research elsewhere. After the sheriff left, promising to increase patrols on the road to Hunter's property, Cassidy turned to Hunter with determined eyes. I'm not leaving, she said firmly. That's exactly what they want. Hunter admired her courage, even as concern gnawed at him. This isn't your fight, Cassidy. It became my fight when someone threatened me for pursuing the truth, she replied. Besides, I think we're close to something important. Why else would the Millers be so determined to stop my research? Hunter had been wondering the same thing. The feud seemed disproportionate to the historical grievance. What aren't we seeing? They spent the afternoon reviewing Cassidy's research materials, looking for anything that might explain the Millers' extreme reaction. As the sun began to set, Hunter built up the fire while Cassidy sorted through copies of old land records. Wait, she said suddenly, holding up a faded map. Look at this. The original Miller claim wasn't just any piece of land. It was directly over what was documented as ancient grounds in Apache records. Hunter leaned over her shoulder to examine the map. Burial grounds. Maybe, Cassidy said, excitement building in her voice. But the Apache also had sacred sites for other purposes, vision quests, ceremonial gatherings, healing springs. And Jacob Caldwell testified that Miller was violating these grounds, Hunter mused, causing his claim to be revoked. Cassidy nodded eagerly. But here's what's interesting. After the claim was revoked, that particular parcel wasn't reassigned. It remained unclaimed until 1896, when the government opened it for mining. Mining what? Gold, initially, Cassidy said. But according to these records, they found something else. Something that made the land far more valuable. She pointed to a notation on another document. Copper. A massive deposit that's still being mined today. Hunter's eyes widened as the implications sank in. The Miller Mining Company. They eventually got the land back. And have made millions from it over the generations, Cassidy confirmed. But there's more. According to these reports, the initial mining operation uncovered extensive ancient artifacts, Apache ceremonial items that should have been protected under later antiquities laws. They destroyed an Apache sacred site for profit, Hunter said, the pieces falling into place. And my ancestor tried to prevent it. Not just any sacred site, Cassidy said, her voice hushed with realization. According to this journal entry from 1897, workers uncovered a natural spring surrounded by carved stones. The Apache believed the water had healing properties. She looked up at Hunter, her eyes wide. The same spring morning sky was said to guard after she disappeared from Jacob's life. Hunter felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. You think she was protecting the sacred site? I think she might have been living near it, Cassidy said. And I think the Miller family might have been responsible for more than just destroying a sacred site. There's a letter here from Jacob to a federal agent, dated 1875, where he accuses local interests of violence against the Apache, specifically mentioning a woman who disappeared. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. If the Millers had been responsible for Morning Sky's disappearance, possibly her death, and had subsequently destroyed a sacred site for profit, it would explain their determination to keep this history buried. This is why they're so threatened by your research, Hunter said. It's not just about an old land dispute. It's about covering up a possible murder and cultural destruction. Foundations built on blood, Cassidy agreed grimly. The Miller fortune could be tainted in the eyes of the community if this came out, especially with growing awareness of historical injustices against Native Americans. Hunter stood, pacing the cabin as he processed this information. So what do we do with this? Cassidy looked thoughtful. I need to verify some of these connections. There's an Apache cultural center about 3 hours from here. They might have records or oral histories that could confirm our theory. We should go tomorrow, Hunter decided. Together. I don't think you should be alone right now, and honestly, I'm invested in this story now too. It's my family history as much as anyone's. Cassidy smiled, reaching for his hand. Thank you for believing in this. In me. Hunter pulled her gently to her feet and into his arms. How could I not? You've brought life back to this place. To me. Their kiss this time was deeper, infused with a sense of shared purpose and growing connection. Hunter felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be, with exactly the right person. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They set out early, taking Hunter's truck down the mountain toward the highway that would lead them to the Apache Cultural Center. The forest was beautiful in the early light, mist rising between the pines like spirits awakening. I never get tired of this view, Hunter said as they rounded a curve that offered a panoramic vista of the valley below. It's stunning, Cassidy agreed. I can see why your ancestors chose this place. Why you stayed. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, until Hunter noticed a vehicle in his rearview mirror, moving fast on the narrow road. Hold on, he warned, gripping the wheel tighter as the approaching truck closed the distance between them rapidly. Before Cassidy could respond, the truck behind them accelerated, ramming into their rear bumper with enough force to send them fishtailing on the gravel road. Hunter fought for control as their truck slid dangerously close to the steep drop-off on the passenger side. Hunter! Cassidy cried as the vehicle hit them again, harder this time. Hunter glimpsed Mike Miller behind the wheel of the pursuing truck, his face contorted with rage. Hang on! He shouted to Cassidy as he accelerated, trying to put distance between them and their attacker. The road narrowed ahead, winding precariously along the mountainside. Hunter knew these curves intimately from years of travel, but at these speeds, one mistake could be fatal. Miller was clearly beyond reason, determined to run them off the road regardless of the consequences. As they approached a sharp bend, Hunter made a split-second decision. Instead of taking the curve at speed, he abruptly pulled the emergency brake and cut the wheel hard, sending their truck into a controlled slide that brought them to a stop facing the oncoming vehicle. Miller had no time to react. He swerved to avoid a head-on collision, his truck skidding wildly before crashing into a stand of young pines on the uphill side of the road. Stay here, Hunter ordered Cassidy, jumping out to check on Miller. Despite everything, he couldn't leave a man to die on his mountain. The Miller truck was crumpled against the trees, steam rising from the damaged radiator. Hunter approached cautiously, finding Mike slumped over the steering wheel, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. He was conscious but dazed. You're a dead man, Caldwell. Miller slurred as Hunter pulled the driver's door open. You and your Apache-loving whore both. Hunter's patience snapped. He grabbed Miller by the collar, pulling him half out of the truck. Listen to me, you ignorant bastard. Your family built their fortune on blood and theft. We know about Morning Sky, about the sacred site, about the copper mine. And now we know you're willing to commit murder to keep it quiet. Miller's eyes widened with shock, then narrowed with hatred. You can't prove anything. Nobody cares about some dead Indian from a century ago. People care about justice, Hunter said, his voice deadly calm. Even delayed justice. An attempted murder is a lot easier to prove, especially when you've got witnesses. He released Miller's collar, letting him slump back into the seat. The sheriff is on his way. I'd start thinking about what kind of deal you want to make. Hunter returned to his truck, where Cassidy was already on the phone with the sheriff, reporting the incident. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady as she described what had happened. Are you okay? Hunter asked when she ended the call. Cassidy nodded, though her face was pale. He really tried to kill us. He's desperate, Hunter said. People who build their lives on lies usually are. They waited for the sheriff in silence, watching as Miller remained in his damaged truck, apparently too injured or too wise to attempt escape. When Sheriff Daniels arrived 20 minutes later, his expression was grim as he surveyed the scene. Mike Miller, he said, approaching the crashed truck. Want to explain why these folks are accusing you of attempted murder? Miller spat on the ground. It was an accident. Brakes failed on the mountain road. Funny how your brake failure involved accelerating into the back of another vehicle, the sheriff observed dryly. Twice, according to the witnesses. As the sheriff handcuffed Miller and led him to the patrol car, Hunter and Cassidy provided their statements, including the research they'd uncovered about the Miller family's historical actions. That's quite a story, Sheriff Daniels said when they finished. Can't say I'm entirely surprised. There have always been whispers about how the Millers got their start in mining. Never enough evidence to matter, though. We're heading to the Apache Cultural Center to confirm some of our findings, Cassidy explained. If we can substantiate the connection between Morning Sky's disappearance and the Miller family, it could change the historical record significantly. The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. Well, you've got an attempted murder charge to back up your theory that the Millers have something to hide. That should count for something. He glanced at their truck, which had sustained damage to the rear but appeared drivable. You two be careful. Mike's got brothers who won't take his arrest lightly. After giving their contact information for formal statements later, Hunter and Cassidy continued their journey, both shaken but more determined than ever to uncover the truth. The Apache Cultural Center was housed in a modern building designed to reflect traditional architecture. Inside, they were greeted by Elena Martinez, the center's historian, who listened intently as Cassidy explained their research and recent experiences. The story of Morning Sky is known to us, Elena confirmed, leading them to a research room filled with documents and artifacts. Though we know her by her Apache name, which translates roughly to she who watches the dawn. She was indeed connected to Jacob Caldwell, and her disappearance has been part of our oral history. Elena pulled out a leather-bound journal from a climate-controlled case. This belonged to Thomas Broken Arrow, who was a spiritual leader during that time. He documented interactions with settlers, including Jacob Caldwell, whom he considered a friend and ally. The journal contained entries in Apache with English translations added later. Elena turned to a marked page. Here, Thomas writes about Morning Sky's concern for the sacred spring. He says, "She who watches the dawn fears the white men with measuring tools will find the healing waters. She stays near to protect what belongs to the people, though the white trader has built her a cabin where the forests meet." Jacob built her a place to live, Hunter said softly. Separate but connected, Cassidy added, like they were trying to find a middle path between two worlds. Elena nodded, turning to another entry dated winter 1874. This is the last mention of Morning Sky. Thomas writes, "She who watches the dawn has not been seen for 3 moons. The white trader searches the forests calling her name. We fear the men who mark the trees have silenced her." The men who mark the trees, Hunter repeated. Surveyors? Most likely, Elena confirmed. This would align with the period when mining companies were exploring the region for resources. The Millers, Cassidy said, the final piece falling into place. They must have found her protecting the sacred spring, and she couldn't finish the sentence. Elena's expression was solemn. Our people have always believed she was killed defending the sacred waters. The spring was eventually destroyed by mining operations, despite Jacob Caldwell's efforts to protect it through legal means. They spent the rest of the day reviewing additional documents that corroborated their theory. A letter from a federal Indian agent mentioned allegations of violence against a native woman in connection with survey work for the Miller mining concern. A newspaper article from 1875 briefly noted frontier justice being served when a local man was found hanging from a tree, reportedly in connection with the disappearance of an Indian woman. Jacob took revenge, Hunter said, reading the article. Or at least, someone did. The records suggest Jacob was questioned but never charged, Elena noted. The case was essentially closed without resolution, which was common when violence involved Native Americans. As they prepared to leave, Elena presented them with copies of the most relevant documents. This history deserves to be told accurately, she said. Both the tragedy and the love story. Jacob and Morning Sky represent what could have been possible between our peoples if fear and greed hadn't prevailed. The drive back to Hunter's cabin was quieter, both of them processing what they had learned. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road as they wound their way back up the mountain. What will you do with all this? Hunter asked finally. For your book, Cassidy gazed out at the passing forest. Tell the truth. All of it. The love between Jacob and Morning Sky, the violence that ended it, the destruction of sacred land for profit, and how those echoes still reverberate today. Hunter nodded, thinking about Mike Miller's desperate attempt to silence them. Some echoes are louder than others. When they reached the cabin, the setting sun had painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Hunter helped Cassidy from the truck, both of them weary from the emotional day. I'll build a fire, he said as they entered the cabin. It's getting cold. As Hunter knelt by the wood stove, Cassidy moved to stand behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. For believing in this journey. For saving our lives today. Hunter stood, turning to face her. In the fading light, her blonde hair seemed to glow with the same warmth as the kindling fire. I think maybe you saved me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I was existing, not living. You brought purpose back into my life. Connection. Cassidy stepped closer, her green eyes searching his. What happens now? With us? Hunter took her hands in his. I don't know exactly, but I know I don't want to go back to solitude. I know I want to see where this leads. Even if it's complicated? Cassidy asked. Even if it means dealing with the outside world again. Even then, Hunter said with certainty. Some connections are worth the risk. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning. As the fire caught and filled the cabin with warmth, Hunter felt something he hadn't experienced since losing Sarah, hope. Not just for tomorrow, but for all the days that might follow. Over the next weeks, their story unfolded in unexpected ways. The attempted murder charge against Mike Miller led to increased scrutiny of the Miller Mining Company's practices, past and present. When Cassidy's research became public through a series of articles in historical journals, the Apache Nation filed claims regarding the destruction of cultural heritage sites. Hunter found himself embracing a new role as guardian of his family's true legacy. He granted the Apache Cultural Center access to his land to search for any remaining traces of the original trading post. The foundation stones Cassidy had shown him became the site of a small commemorative plaque honoring the relationship between Jacob Caldwell and Morning Sky. As for Hunter and Cassidy, their connection deepened with each passing day. Cassidy extended her stay, her book research evolving to include not just the historical love story, but its modern echo in their own relationship. Hunter began designing an addition to the cabin, a proper office where Cassidy could write, with windows facing the forest she had come to love as much as he did. Do you think they would approve? Cassidy asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Jacob and Morning Sky? Of us carrying on their story? Hunter smiled, his arm around her shoulders. I think they would recognize what we've found. A chance to bridge different worlds. A connection worth fighting for. Cassidy rested her head against him, her voice soft in the gathering twilight. A love story that began with a lonely mountain man and a woman who arrived unexpectedly in his life. And changed everything. Hunter finished, pressing a kiss to her hair. Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, witnesses to a story that had come full circle across generations. In the quiet mountain night, two souls who had found each other against all odds sat in peaceful silence, their future stretching before them like an unwritten page, ready for their story to continue. Thank you for listening. Please rate this story from 1 to 10 and let us know where you're listening from.